She bought a rundown garage for just $1,000, hoping it could be a fresh start. But beneath the cracked tile and rusted lifts, Marley Reyes found a sealed trapdoor and a tunnel that hadn't been opened in nearly a century. What lay beneath wasn't just history buried in dust. It was a secret worth millions, hidden in silence and steel. And it was waiting for the right hands to bring it back to life. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this spark something in you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is even more jaw-dropping than this one. Let's get started. The envelope was thinner than she expected. No ceremony, no fanfare. Just a single key taped to a wrinkled piece of county transfer paperwork that still smelled faintly of mildew. Marley Reyes stared at it from the driver's seat of her aging truck, engine idling in front of a building that looked more like a condemned gas station than a place to start over. The old garage stood slouched on the edge of town like it was trying to disappear, a sagging awning, shattered glass panes patched with plywood, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Vickers Auto Service." So faded, it looked like it hadn't seen fresh paint since the 70s. She didn't come for charm. She came because it was the only thing she could afford. Her fingers hovered over the ignition for a long moment before she shut off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. Marley grabbed the key, her hand still smudged with grease from the brake job she finished that morning, her last paid gig before the shop she'd been working at closed for good. 2 years of bouncing between temp garages and patching strangers' cars in parking lots had led her here. 27 years old, broke, and standing in front of a $1,000 gamble. She walked toward the front door, boots crunching on gravel and broken beer bottles. The padlock on the gate had already been cut by the county. They told her the place had sat empty for over 15 years. The previous owner died with no heirs, and nobody wanted the building, not even the city. They sold it for back taxes, just trying to clear the books. Marley was the only bidder, and even then, she had to borrow from a friend to make the full payment. The key slid into the lock, hesitated for half a second, then turned with a sigh like the building itself was exhaling. The door creaked open into darkness. Dust floated in thick slants of late afternoon light. It smelled like old oil, burnt rubber, and damp insulation. Home, Marley thought. Inside, there were 2 bays, a workbench sagging under rusted tools, and a busted Coca-Cola machine tilted against the wall. Spiderwebs blanketed the corners. In one bay, a hydraulic lift still stood stained, silent, and surprisingly intact. She ran her hand along it, then across the bench, touching the layered grime like it might tell her a story. This wasn't just a garage. It was the ghost of someone else's dream. She could feel her heart thudding in her chest, part nerves, part disbelief. It was hers now. Cracked tiles, missing roof panels, faulty wiring, all of it. But as she walked deeper into the space, something strange settled in her gut. Not dread. Something quieter, like she wasn't alone. Marley paused near the back wall, where the tile ended and the concrete changed color. There, barely noticeable under a tarp and 2 rusted tool cabinets, was a hatch square, bolted and out of place. She moved the tarp with her foot and knelt. Her fingers traced the edge. It wasn't just for storage. The metal was thick, industrial, like something meant to stay sealed. She stood, brushing dust from her jeans, and let the thought sit in the back of her mind. Tomorrow, she told herself. First, get the lights working. First, sweep the floors. First, make it livable. But even as she turned back toward the door, that hatch tugged at her thoughts like a whisper. Something's down there. The first night in the garage wasn't easy. Marley unrolled her sleeping bag in the old office behind the service bays. Just her and a second-hand lantern casting shadows against peeling paint and a corkboard still pinned with faded inspection checklists from 1994. She kept her phone charging off a portable power bank and used bottled water to rinse her face. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. And after 2 years of couch hopping and living out of her truck, ownership felt like rebellion. But sleep didn't come easy. Every creak, every gust of wind through the cracked vent above the door made the place feel more alive than abandoned. At one point, around 2 a.m., she thought she heard something shift in the service bay. Not loud, just the sound of something settling or breathing. In the morning, she put the voices in her head on hold and got to work. Most of the day was spent dragging trash into piles. Decades of busted parts, oily rags, mouse-eaten seat covers, and the remnants of someone's long-forgotten lunch stuffed behind a filing cabinet. Underneath all the junk, she found the bones of a once-functional garage and a few surprises. An old wooden stool with a worn leather cushion that still held shape. A steel toolbox bolted to the wall, its drawers stuck shut with grime, and a faded photograph, curled at the edges, stuck under a dusty coffee mug. Marley picked it up gently, brushing off the film of time. It showed two men, one older, one maybe her age, standing in front of the very same garage. The younger one wore a mechanic's jumpsuit with Danny stitched in cursive above the breast pocket. Both smiled with the pride of builders. Behind them was a 1942 Buick, freshly painted, wheels gleaming. Someone loved this place once. She tacked the photo up near the office door, unsure why, but it felt right. By mid-afternoon, Marley returned to the hatch. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had cleared the debris and pulled the rusted cabinets aside, revealing more of its edges. The bolts were wide and flat, sunk into concrete with military precision. There was no handle, just a keyhole and 4 thick hinge pins, almost like a bank vault door, but horizontal. She crouched beside it and tapped gently with a wrench. Hollow. Something was beneath it. Maybe a storm shelter, maybe an old oil pit. But the way the hatch sat slightly off color from the rest of the floor made her wonder. It didn't match the garage's haphazard construction. It planned. She pulled out her flashlight and inspected the keyhole. Old, but clean, no rust buildup. Like someone had oiled it now and then. That chilled her more than anything else. Someone had been here. Maybe not recently, but not that long ago either. She tried her garage key in the lock. No luck. Tried a few old keys she'd collected over the years. Still, nothing. It would take more than a lucky guess to get it open. Marley sat cross-legged beside the hatch, staring at it for a long time, listening to the soft groan of wind against the metal siding. There was something beneath her feet, something waiting, and for the first time since she signed the paperwork, she realized this garage might not just be forgotten. It might be hiding. By the third day, Marley's muscles ached in all the usual places. Shoulders, lower back, palms scraped raw from wire brushes and crowbars. But the pain felt honest, like progress. She'd cleared most of the debris from the main bay and managed to splice together a working circuit to get half the overhead lights on. The others flickered, unsure whether to die or revive. She let them decide in their own time, but no matter how much surface work she did, her attention kept drifting back to the hatch. She couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't belong. Everything else in the garage was makeshift, jury-rigged, or slowly decaying. But the hatch was deliberate, engineered with care and precision. Not factory-made, but custom-built by someone who understood weight, balance, and security. She wasn't just dealing with a storage crawlspace. Whoever made this wanted it to stay sealed. By late afternoon, Marley gave in. She grabbed her angle grinder and a face shield, dragged the extension cord across the bay, and crouched next to the hatch like she was squaring off with an opponent. Sparks flew as she sliced into the rusted bolt heads. The metal screamed under the blade, but slowly, it gave way. Each bolt she cut loose deepened the tightness in her chest. Curiosity wrestled with caution. After an hour, she pried the last hinge pin free. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight as she ran it across the seams one more time. Then she wedged a crowbar into the lip and leaned back. The hatch groaned loud and low, like something exhaling for the first time in decades. It opened. Just a crack. But enough. Cold air rushed out, damp and metallic. The scent hit her like a wave. Rust, engine oil, and something she couldn't quite name, like wet paper and forgotten time. She paused, heart pounding, waiting for something. A rat. A collapse. A voice. Nothing came. She peeled it back further until the lid rested open, revealing a square opening about 4 feet wide. A steel ladder was bolted to the side of the shaft, disappearing into pitch black. The walls below were lined with concrete, not stone or dirt, but smooth, reinforced concrete like a military bunker. Marley grabbed her flashlight and aimed it down. The beam only reached so far, maybe 12 feet, before the ladder disappeared into a corridor. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected it to go that deep. She definitely hadn't expected what she saw just beyond the bottom, rung a rusted steel door with a round turning handle, like something from a submarine. It was all too clean, too well built. This wasn't just a forgotten root cellar. This was an entrance to something that someone spent real money to bury. She should have walked away, sealed it back up, sold the garage to the next poor soul who thought they were buying a fixer-upper. But Marley Reyes had always been the kind of woman who pressed forward, even when the map ended. So she grabbed a coil of rope, strapped her flashlight to her wrist, and started to descend, one rung at a time, into the dark, into the unknown, into a past that wasn't ready to stay buried. Her boots hit the concrete floor with a quiet thud. The air was colder down here, almost damp, like the breath of the earth itself had been trapped for decades. Marley paused at the bottom of the ladder, letting her eyes adjust to the dim spill of light from above. The flashlight beam danced across smooth concrete walls, low ceilings and steel pipes running overhead, dusty, corroded, but still intact. She turned slowly, taking it all in. The corridor stretched in both directions, but one side was blocked by what looked like a cave-in, broken beams and fallen rock wedged tightly, likely from the garage, shifting over time. The other direction, though, that was where the real question waited. The submarine-style door stood slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry or never returned. Its turning mechanism was rusted, but functional. Marley gripped it and gave it a twist. It moved with a shriek that echoed down the corridor like a cry. She pulled the door open and stepped inside. The room beyond was a workshop. Not a modern one, but something between a bunker and an inventor's lab, hidden beneath layers of secrecy. The air smelled of metal filings and time. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with dusty crates labeled in old marker, Mixture A, spool testing, lead piston sets. There were blueprints pinned behind cloudy glass, a cot in the corner, blanket still folded, empty cans of oil, a workbench covered in tools, too old-fashioned to recognize but crafted with care. And in the center of the room, bolted to the floor, was something else entirely. A machine, about the size of a motorcycle engine, but wrong in all the right ways. Sleek curves where there should have been edges, polished aluminum parts that defied the rust around them. It looked unfinished, like it had been waiting for hands that knew what they were doing. Marley stepped closer, her heart rattling in her chest. The machine wasn't labeled. No serial number, no manufacturer. But it was clearly an engine of some kind, not combustion-based. No fuel lines, no spark plugs. Just copper coils, dense circuitry, and a compartment that resembled a primitive battery cell. She reached out and ran her fingertips along the cold metal casing. A thrill of something not fear, not excitement, but reverence passed through her. This thing had been built with intention, with purpose. And suddenly, it wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a time capsule. A secret. A hidden history buried under decades of dust and neglect. She glanced around the room again and spotted a binder resting on the corner of the workbench, its cover brittle with age but intact. Scrawled in careful penmanship, Vickers Project Log 1937, 1941. Her fingers hesitated just above the cover. The name matched the sign above the garage. Whoever built this place, whoever built this machine, had done it in silence, in secret. And for a reason they hadn't written down in a user manual. Marley opened the log. The first page held just one sentence, underlined twice. What we build here must never fall into the wrong hands. She closed the binder slowly, heart racing. She was in. And whatever this was, it wasn't abandoned. It was hidden. For a reason. Marley didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, though part of her was, but because her mind wouldn't stop spinning. The machine, the binder, the bunker. She couldn't stop replaying the sentence over and over in her head. What we build here must never fall into the wrong hands. It wasn't just engineering. It was warning. By sunrise, she was back beneath the garage, hunched over the workbench in the bunker with a thermos of burnt coffee and a flashlight clamped between her teeth. She flipped through the binder page by page. The entries were short, dense, technical. The man behind them had tidy handwriting, methodical and precise, like someone who believed in order and secrets. The 12th of February 1938. Test coil failure. Current overload. Must revisit copper ratios. The 3rd of March 1938. Prototype ran for 42 seconds. No combustion. No sound. Like it floated. Marley read faster. The machine he was building wasn't a traditional engine. It seemed to operate on magnetic propulsion, something that shouldn't have existed in the late 1930 seconds, at least not outside of sci-fi novels. She could barely keep up with some of the terminology, and she was no amateur. But this was beyond theory. This was vision. By the 30th page, the entries grew more fragmented mentions of outside interest, of someone named Webster, who kept showing up uninvited, of pressure to sell the designs. But whoever this man was, he hadn't wanted to let it go. She turned to the last few pages and found them nearly unreadable, water-damaged and smudged. Just pieces of sentences. If they find it, destroy it. They know about the tunnel. Webster is not who he says he is. Then nothing. But tucked behind the final page was something else. A folded envelope, yellowed with time, and inside, 4 newspaper clippings dated between 1941 and 1943. She laid them out on the bench. The first was a small obituary. Local inventor Daniel Vickers declared missing. It mentioned he'd last been seen working late at his garage on the edge of town. No body. No leads. The second clipping was more suspicious. Fire destroys rear section of Vickers Auto Service. No arson was proven, but the article speculated about possible foul play and noted that federal agents had been seen in the area shortly after the incident. The third was a blurry photo of Vickers himself, lean, sharp-eyed, standing in front of a car with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. And the fourth, Marley froze as she unfolded it. A page from Mechanics Weekly, dated July 1940. The headline read, "Anonymous Inventor Claims Breakthrough in Magnetic Propulsion." No name, no photo. But the diagram published alongside the article, it matched the machine sitting 6 feet from her almost perfectly. She stared at the sketch, then back at the engine. This wasn't a one-off idea. Vickers had been on the brink of something world-changing, and someone had tried to bury it. Marley stood, heart pounding in her ears. She knew the type of people who had money and power in the 1940 seconds. Government suits, war contracts, industrial titans who'd do anything to suppress technology that threatened oil and gas. And she had just dug up what they couldn't keep buried. She looked back at the machine, quiet, waiting. The man in the photo, the clippings, the binder, he hadn't just vanished. He'd been silenced. And now, decades later, Marley Reyes was holding his unfinished revolution in her hands. Marley had always been good with her hands. Not just grease and gears, but the feel of metal, the rhythm of torque, the unspoken dialogue between tool and tension. But the thing sitting in front of her wasn't something she could just wrench back to life. It wasn't a carburetor or a drivetrain. It was a puzzle from the future hidden in the past, and now it was hers to solve. She spent the next week in near isolation. Days blurred into nights as she divided her time between clearing out the garage above and studying every inch of the machine below. The town didn't notice. No one came by. Marley liked it that way. She had rewired the bunker's lighting with salvaged bulbs from the upper bays and a few extension cords hooked to a gas generator she kept in her truck. Every flicker of light felt like progress. Each evening, she returned to the binder, cross-referencing every sketch, each note, each cryptic margin scribble. The entries grew clearer once she understood Vickers' rhythm. His shorthand revealed a system copper windings coiled in a specific orientation, designed to manipulate electromagnetic fields. There were no pistons, no combustion chambers, no spark ignition. This wasn't a motor that burned fuel. It was one that bent force, moved mass through fields of invisible pressure. Silent, clean, advanced, and somehow, Vickers had designed it in a time when radar was still cutting edge. Marley sat at the bench with her multimeter, checking continuity through the hand-wound coils. Most of the internal wiring had corroded, but the casing was solid. She sketched out what she could, drawing blueprints on the back of old receipts and cardboard scraps. This wasn't just restoration. It was resurrection. At night, she fell asleep with grease on her skin and open notebooks on her chest. She dreamed of copper singing, of machines whispering through the floor, of blue light humming from engines that didn't make a sound. On the 6th day, something shifted. She was tightening the final bolt on the casing when a subtle click echoed through the machine. Then, a hum, soft, barely audible. Her breath caught. It only lasted a second, then silence again. But she had felt it, a flicker of power. The hair on her arms stood up like static had passed through the air. She staggered back, heart hammering. "Holy hell," she whispered. "You're not dead." Something inside her snapped into focus. This wasn't just some old relic or half-baked invention. This was energy clean, self-sustaining, and light years ahead of its time. And it wasn't hers to sell. It was hers to finish. Marley picked up her phone, took a single photo of the machine, and opened a new post. No caption, no hashtags, just the image of the half-rebuilt engine sitting on a steel bench, surrounded by blueprints, coils, and dust. She stared at it for a moment, then hit upload. Let the world come. Let them wonder. Because what Daniel Vickers had started in secret, Marley Reyes was about to finish in the open, and nothing, not history, not silence, not even time was going to stop her now. Marley didn't expect the photo to go viral. She didn't even add a caption. Just a dimly lit image of the machine, half assembled, framed by scattered blueprints and her shadow stretching behind it. It wasn't even her main account, just an old feed she used to share shop projects and the occasional junkyard find. She posted it late, around midnight, then fell asleep on the cot in the bunker with a socket wrench still in her hand. By morning, everything had changed. Her phone was glowing with notifications, thousands of likes, comments from usernames she didn't recognize, engineers, mechanics, conspiracy theorists, tech bloggers, historians. One repost had the caption, "What am I looking at? And why does it look like alien tech from the 1930 seconds?" Another wrote, "Is this the Vickers engine? The Vickers engine? I thought it was a myth." Marley's stomach flipped. She hadn't realized people knew. A few clicks later, she found forums dedicated to Daniel Vickers, tinfoil theories, old scan newspaper clippings, wild speculation about a lost propulsion engine buried during World War II, allegedly suppressed by oil executives and shadowy federal agents. To Marley, he was just a name on a dusty binder. But to them, he was a ghost genius, a myth wrapped in wires and unfinished potential. Within 48 hours, things escalated. A journalist from a tech site emailed her asking for an interview. A local university physics professor messaged her directly, offering to help analyze the design. 2 YouTubers made reaction videos with glowing thumbnails and titles like, "Is this the forgotten engine that could change everything?" Then came the bigger names. A clean energy firm out of California offered to fly her out to evaluate the potential commercial application. A venture capitalist in New York sent a 7-word message that made her blink twice. "I'll pay you 7 figures for exclusivity." She didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. The garage, once silent and forgotten, now buzzed with potential. Marley moved the engine to a safer corner of the bunker and locked the hatch at night. Above ground, she swept the bays, rehung a salvaged light fixture, and sprayed the cracked awning with a pressure washer until the name Vickers Auto Service gleamed through. It felt less like cleaning and more like unburying a grave and then turning it into a monument. She didn't want money. Not yet. She wanted understanding, respect. She wanted to finish what he started, not sell it before she knew what it even was. The machine deserved that. Vickers deserved that. And maybe, so did she. That afternoon, as she was sanding rust off the old lift, a car pulled up to the curb. A sleek, black Tesla with government plates. Marley froze. A man stepped out. Dark suit, messenger bag, sunglasses despite the clouded sky. He looked out of place in the middle of town, and even more out of place stepping into her busted-up garage. He didn't introduce himself, just walked up to her calmly, opened his bag, and handed her a card. Plain white, embossed. Department of Energy Advanced Concepts Division. And below that, "We've been looking for this engine for a very long time." He gave her a polite nod. "You've stirred up quite the conversation, Miss Reyes." Marley didn't answer. She just stared at him, the rusted lift behind her humming softly with wind. The air between them thickened. The world had found her. But Marley Reyes wasn't about to let it take what she hadn't even begun to finish. The man in the suit didn't stay long. He wasn't the type who needed to. His presence alone carried enough weight to shift the air inside the garage. He asked no questions. He made no threats. Just handed her the card and said, "When you're ready to talk, we'll be listening." Then he climbed back into his black Tesla and disappeared down the gravel road like a shadow retreating before dawn. Marley watched until the car was out of sight, her fingers clutching the card like it might burn through her skin. She wasn't sure what felt worse, the silence that followed, or the fact that deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. By nightfall, the inbox linked to her garage's ancient website was overflowing. A law firm from Chicago representing a private investor offered her $2 million for the engine, as is. No questions asked. A startup in Munich promised lab space, housing, and a research team. You bring the engine, we bring the future. One offer simply read, $5 M, full rights, immediate transfer. Her hands trembled as she read through them. She'd never even seen 5 figures in her bank account. Her truck had 2 different tires on the front, and her boots had duct tape under the sole. The thought of 7 zeros hit her like a punch to the ribs. She could be done. Never struggle again. But when she glanced down at the photo of Daniel Vickers still tacked above her workbench, the image of that sharp-eyed man standing proud in front of his creation, her gut pulled tight. The offers all talked about value, potential, ownership, not purpose. Not one of them asked what the engine meant. She walked down into the bunker again that night, slower this time, like descending into a sacred place. The machine sat under a soft lamp, casting curved shadows across the concrete floor. It was still silent, inert but not lifeless. It felt like it was waiting. She paced for a while before sitting on the cot, her hands laced behind her head, eyes on the ceiling. Her whole life, Marley had been fixing things for other people. Broken brake lines, slipping clutches, damaged lives. Her work was about making the world move a little smoother, for someone else, and always for someone else. But this was different. This wasn't fixing. It was finishing. It was fulfilling something bigger than herself. She opened the binder again, flipping to the last page, the one with Vickers' final warning. What we build here must never fall into the wrong hands. She thought about the bunker, about the years he'd spent down here in silence, about how close he came to changing everything, and how the world had swallowed him whole. But she wasn't going to vanish. She closed the binder and stood up, the hum of determination replacing the static of fear. In the morning, she drafted her own message, not a response to the offers, but a declaration. She posted it on every account she had. I won't sell it. I won't hide it. I'll finish what he started. On my terms. The next day, someone spray-painted the word truth on her front door. She didn't erase it. She underlined it in red, because Marley Reyes didn't want a buyout. She wanted a breakthrough. The day Marley powered it up, the town had no idea history was unfolding below their feet. Just another gray Tuesday morning in Halperin, Georgia. The diner smelled like bacon grease. The hardware store was out of spark plugs again, and down at the corner garage, the lights flickered once before staying on. But underground, something ancient and impossible began to stir. Marley stood in the center of the bunker, alone. The copper coils she'd spent weeks rewinding, now encased in a protective sheath of polished steel. Every piece was cleaned, balanced, and reassembled according to Vickers' original notes with a few updates of her own. She had swapped out obsolete connectors, added digital monitors, even built a custom power controller rigged from spare lithium cells and parts she'd scavenged from a decommissioned hybrid truck. No instructions. No blueprint for success. Just her, a dead man's scribbles, and enough hope to ignite a small country. She flipped the first switch. Nothing exploded. Always a good sign. She flipped the second. The lights dipped, then leveled. A third switch. A deep, low hum filled the room, not from the machine but from the space around it. Like the air itself was vibrating in response. Marley stepped back, hand hovering over the emergency cutoff she'd wired into the panel. Then, slowly, the engine lit up. Not with flame or spark, but with movement. The central rotor began to spin, not fast, not loud, but impossibly smooth. No friction, no sound, just silent, floating motion. Marley blinked. There were no belts, no visible propulsion. The copper coils pulsed faintly with blue light. It was working. The machine was drawing power from its own field, a self-sustaining loop of magnetics and motion. Vickers hadn't just dreamed of a new kind of engine. He'd built one. Marley stepped closer, heart pounding. The gauges were reading steady. The field flux was within safe parameters. No overheating, no drop in current. She whispered, "You're alive." It wasn't just an engine anymore. It was proof. Proof that clean, silent, near-limitless power could exist and had existed long before the world was ready for it. She filmed it on her phone. No filters, no narration. Just 30 seconds of the machine at work. Then she posted it with one line. "It works." That post shattered the internet. Within an hour, physics professors were analyzing the footage frame by frame. Tech investors were calling it the most important invention since the transistor. Conspiracy channels claimed she'd just uncovered anti-gravity. Even the Department of Energy requested a non-intrusive, observer-only site visit. Hessen, but Marley didn't reply. Instead, she opened the doors of the garage for the first time since arriving. Let the town come in. Let them see. First came Eddie from the junkyard, who used to give her free brake rotors when she was short on cash. Then Rosa, the old librarian who remembered Daniel Vickers from when she was a child. Then a line formed: kids, families, the curious, the skeptical. She let them walk down into the bunker one at a time. Showed them the engine. Told them the story. She wasn't hiding it. Not now. Not ever again. And as the room filled with people whose faces glowed, not from blueprints or money, but wonder, Marley knew the machine wasn't the only thing that had been brought back to life. The real power wasn't in the engine itself. It was in what it ignited in people. Curiosity, hope, possibility, a spark. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start a revolution. The offers didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Billionaires called. Tech giants sent emissaries. A senator even showed up at the diner across the street. By coincidence. All of them came with promises, patents, protection, partnerships, percentages. Marley listened, nodded politely, and turned them down. Not because she didn't need the money. God knew she could have used a working water heater and a roof that didn't whistle in the wind. But something inside her had shifted. The moment that engine came to life, so did she. And what they offered paled in comparison to what she'd already found. It wasn't just about Vickers anymore. It wasn't even about the engine. It was about ownership, of story, of legacy, of truth. She created a foundation, not flashy, not corporate. Just a small team of thinkers, engineers, and mechanics who believed in open-source innovation. They named it the Tunnel Project, a nod to where it all began, and pledged to keep the engine's design free, shared, and impossible to buy out. Marley uploaded all of Vickers' notes, scanned, annotated, modernized, and released her full schematics to the public. The response was electric. Universities wanted in. Makerspaces started building replicas. Documentaries were pitched. Someone even sent her a 3D printed mini replica of the engine, painted gold, with the words, "For when the world remembers who lit the match." But even as her name made headlines and her face appeared in news feeds, Marley kept her hands dirty. She still ran the garage, still changed brake pads for single moms, still tuned up tractors for farmers who paid her in peach cobbler. She didn't become a symbol. She stayed a mechanic, because that's what she was. And what she was enough. One quiet afternoon, long after the frenzy had died down, Marley stood alone in the garage, staring at the open hatch beneath the floor. The air rising from it no longer felt mysterious or cold. It felt familiar, like a root something old and buried that still gave life above the surface. Leo, a high schooler she'd taken on as an apprentice, was sweeping near the back bay. He paused, watching her. "You ever think about what would have happened if you never opened that hatch?" he asked. She smiled. "All the time." He looked confused. "And you're not scared?" "Terrified," she said. "But fear's just a sign you're near something important." She walked to the back office, where a framed photo now hung on the wall. The same black and white image she found that first week. Daniel Vickers and the young man with grease on his chin, standing proud in front of their creation. Underneath it, she'd placed a brass plate with 4 simple words. Built to be found. Outside, the garage buzzed with quiet work, not with the sound of commerce or chaos, but the steady rhythm of hope being restored, one spark at a time. And as the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long golden light through the open bay doors, Marley stood at the center of it all, not wealthy in dollars, but rich in something rarer. Purpose. The tunnel had led to more than a machine. It had led to a truth buried beneath time and concrete and fear, a reminder that even forgotten places can carry the future, and even the quietest hands can hold the weight of the world. And as she reached down, flipped the switch, and heard that impossibly quiet engine come to life once more, Marley Reyes knew with every cell in her being. Some discoveries aren't meant to be sold, they're meant to be shared.